No DQ Galaxy, we are live with a recap of AEW All Out 2023. We are actually getting started before midnight. I was not expecting that, but I'll take it. Still, a very long show from AEW All Out, as usual, at the United Center in Chicago. Let's get started with this recap. Thank you to everybody watching this, whether it's live or on demand. I do appreciate your viewership and support. Thank you to everybody for tuning in late. I appreciate it. I wanted to talk about one of the 0-hour matches since it was a title match. And that match was the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn versus Team Jarrett for the AEW Trios Championships. We did have a title match on the kickoff. We actually had 3 matches. The first match was a battle royal with the winner having $50,000 donated to the charity of his choosing. Hangman Adam Page was in the pre-show battle royal. He did ultimately win the match. Then we had, I believe it was an 8-woman tag team match. Hikaru Shida's team picked up the victory in that one. And then we had the trios title match. Now, Dennis Rodman, NBA legend, former NWO member during the height of WCW's popularity. He was in the corner of the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn. You had the interference with Karen Jarrett. And at one point, Jeff Jarrett's guitar was brought into the ring. However, the tide turned against Jarrett's team because Dennis Rodman got in the ring, and while the referee was distracted, Rodman hit Satnam Singh with the guitar, and then Jay Lethal was pinned after Max Caster came off the top with the mic drop. Still your trios champions. No surprise here. Kickoff match. Champs pick up a win here. Jeff Jarrett always provides some entertainment. And of course, we had Dennis Rodman out there, who is indeed a character. Our first match of the pay-per-view was the new tag team champions, Adam Cole and MJF, who is the world champion. They defended the Ring of Honor tag team titles against the Dark Order. This was the opening match. In my opinion, I don't think this match needed to be on the show. If the world champion's going to be on the show, put him in a world championship match. Make it a 3-hour show. We don't need MJF on the show if he's not defending the world title. It was entertaining. It was what you would expect from these guys. MJF trying to get the fans to chant sportsmanship, and then a thumb to the eye of Reynolds. The storyline in this match was that MJF got hurt. He was selling his neck. You had officials checking in on him, and he actually had to be escorted to the backstage area. For a while, it was Adam Cole by himself against Dark Order, and they were acting very heelish. Prior to MJF being carried away, Reynolds, I believe, used a chair on MJF, hitting him in the back of the neck. And when Adam Cole was out there by himself, you had Evil Uno interfering. But then, of course, I mean, this is no surprise. Anytime this angle's done, you know how it's going to play out. MJF returned. He came back, and we got the teases, like he teased the kangaroo kick. He finally hit the kangaroo kick to both Dark Order members. And then we did get the double clothesline. 1, 2, 3. Still tag team champions, MJF and Adam Cole. It was fun for what it was, but could have been a Dynamite match. And afterwards, we had an angle, which I guess was a creative way to justify these guys being on the show, because Samoa Joe was coming out for his match against Shane Taylor. Now, as he was coming to the ring, MJF was walking to the back, and MJF wanted to walk off on his own without any help. Samoa Joe shoved MJF. Now, this was a callback to NXT of all places, because in NXT, when Samoa Joe was the champion, he was making his entrance, and MJF back then was a security guard when he was trying out for WWE or whatever, and Samoa Joe shoved MJF when MJF was a lowly security guard. So now, here we are, almost a decade later, and I guess we're having Samoa Joe versus MJF for the world title. It's too bad Joe lost to CM Punk. They should have called an audible and had Joe beat Punk and become the new real world champion. Oh, well, I guess you got to go with this now. MJF was pissed. He ran into the ring, brawled with Samoa Joe. People had to come out there and separate them. Crowd chanted, "Let them fight." Order was restored, and we had the ROH television title match, and it was all right, but it was a basic match. Could have been on TV, random TV match. Samoa Joe, of course, got the win here. Taylor did get in a little bit of offense, but no surprise, Samoa Joe won. Coquina clutch submission, picked up the victory. And yeah, I'm guessing maybe Grand Slam, we'll see Samoa Joe versus MJF for the world title. Again, would have been ideal if Joe actually beat Punk, but it is what it is. We had the TNT Championship on the line. Luchasaurus, who is actually the champion, going up against Darby Allin. Some might call Darby the greatest TNT champion to date. This was pretty much what you would expect, where Luchasaurus was dominating the match and Darby kept trying to fight him off and stay in the match. And he would do some of his high-risk moves like a somersault dive off the top to the outside. And Nick Wayne was out there. Christian Cage was out there. And Luchasaurus was dominating. Luchasaurus applied a torture rack, and Christian wanted Nick Wayne to throw in the towel. Nick refused, and Darby went after Christian and then got back in the ring. Darby actually managed to hit an avalanche code red out of the corner onto Luchasaurus, but Luchasaurus kicked out. And then Darby was perhaps going to win the match, went for the coffin drop, but Christian hit Nick Wayne with a steel chair and threatened to do the concerto. Darby was distracted. Luchasaurus took advantage, hit 2 tombstone pile drivers, followed by a lariat, and got the 1-2-3 victory. So yes, Luchasaurus is still your TNT champion. Match was fine, but again, could have been on TV. Did not necessarily need to be on the pay-per-view. And it's funny because I am very much a proponent of having all the titles defended on a pay-per-view, but not when there's 10 championships. Probably even more than that. I don't think it was needed on this particular show. We had Darby on the verge of getting a concerto after the match, but several AEW wrestlers came down and made the save. Where was Sting, by the way? I know Nick Wayne was out there, so we can't say that Darby didn't have any friends, but you would think Sting would have been out there knowing that Christian Cage is always up to no good. But I guess Sting needed a night off after All In. We had Miro versus Powerhouse Hobbs in the meaty men slapping meat match. And I have to say, this was very entertaining. If anything, I think it exceeded expectations. Like, I expected it to be a fun match, but I mean, they were really having a fun big man versus big man encounter, and the fans were really into it, and that helped elevate the match. The fans definitely brought this match up to a higher level. They were doing all sorts of meat chants, yelling out meat every time somebody hit the other guy, and they were chanting meat forever at one point. Like, it was just entertaining because of the fans alone. I was really surprised how much they were into this. And it was very back and forth, very competitive. Hobbs did hit the spine buster. Miro kicked out of it. Miro recovered, applied the game over, and he picked up the submission victory. I was wrong on this one. I thought maybe the younger guy would pick up the win. After the match, we had them shake hands, and it was a very manly handshake, you know, kind of like when the guys lock hands when they arm wrestle, that sort of handshake. More like a hand embrace type of deal. But then we had Hobbs turn against Miro. He attacked him. And then all of a sudden, we had CJ Perry, formerly Lana, making her AEW debut. I wasn't sure if she was ever going to show up, but she did appear, and she actually hit Hobbs with the chair. Hobbs basically no-sold it because it was CJ Perry hitting him. He grabbed the chair. Miro came to the rescue, but Miro was not happy. Miro was upset because he's said it in promos. He's on his own. Nobody's on his side, and he was not pleased. He walked out on his hot wife, CJ Perry. So I guess we'll see where this goes. Walter Cruz sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Walter. He says, yawn, just yawn this whole effing pay-per-view except for Miro. Wow, I'm surprised a little bit that you did not like the show except for Miro. This was the first match that felt like it belonged on the pay-per-view. Like, this was really good. I enjoyed this. And then we had Kris Statlander versus Ruby Soho. You have to get a women's match on the card. And it was fine, but it was every Outcast match for the most part, because you had Saraya, who's the AEW Women's Champion, not defending her title on the pay-per-view. She was out there interfering, and it was back and forth. Crowd was into it, and Ruby kicked out of a lot. She kicked out of an avalanche power slam, and she even got hit with the no future kick, which is usually her move, but Kris used it on her. And Ruby did hit the destination unknown. Kris kicked out. Ruby was frustrated. And at this point, Saraya distracted the referee. Ruby was going to cheat to win using the spray can, but her own teammate, Toni Storm, took it from her. So we're having a split here, it looks like, of the Outcasts. Kris picked up the win. Saturday Night Fever retained her championship. It was all right. They did advance the storyline, but didn't really feel like a pay-per-view caliber match, in my opinion. Felt like it could have just been on a Dynamite episode, but you have to have a women's match on the show. You can only have one, though. Although they did have one during the kickoff. So I guess technically they had two if you include the 0 hour. We had a match that was set up on Collision. Bryan Danielson versus Ricky Starks in a strap match. Ricky Steamboat was out there. The tease going into Collision was that it would be Ricky Steamboat versus Ricky Starks, and Steamboat had a contract. The name on the contract did say the Dragon, but it was the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, coming back early from his broken arm injury. We thought he was going to be out for another month. He came back early. Shout out here to Dylan Hensley, who sent in a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you for that, Dylan. I appreciate it very much. He says, "Hey, Aaron, just wanted to drop in and update you on my progress. I'm currently 5 months in at the AAPW Academy in Austin. I've had a few practice matches, and I'm now in discussion with my head trainer and promoter about my debut." Awesome news, man. Keep it up. Keep chasing the dream, and I hope to see some footage at some point if you make your debut soon. Keep me posted. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Bryan Danielson versus Ricky Starks in a strap match. This was fantastic. This was a pay-per-view caliber match. Danielson still got it. The dude can still go at a high level after all these years, after all the injuries. One of the best of all time. And this match definitely elevated Ricky Starks. In my opinion, I think this was the best Ricky Starks match in his entire career that I've seen. And certainly the most high-profile match he's been in. For a match that was put together last minute, CM Punk being fired, they put on a hell of a performance. Easy for me to say. So Ricky Steamboat was on commentary. Ricky Starks took a cheap shot at Bryan right before the match could even get started. He took his weight belt, hit Bryan in the head with it. Bryan was busted open, and the two were finally strapped together. Starks dominated for several minutes, started taunting, and maybe that was a bad idea because that gave Bryan an opportunity to get back into the fight, and Bryan was just laying in these strap shots. He was hitting him in the back repeatedly. Starks is going to be sore tomorrow for sure. He was choking Starks with the strap. Starks was busted open. Both guys were bleeding. They traded strap shots back and forth. Bryan got fired up and was basically daring Starks to hit him. Bryan was perhaps on the verge of winning, and then Big Bill interfered. But this was the cue for Ricky Steamboat to pull Bill off the apron. Steamboat started chopping him. Bryan threw Starks over the top rope onto Bill before Bill could beat up Steamboat. And then Bryan came off the top rope. They got back in the ring. Ricky Starks hit his spear, but Bryan kicked out. Bryan then hit the running knee. Starks kicked out of that. And Bryan, he got fired up some more. He was ready to kick Starks' effing head in, and he did just that. Bryan applied the label lock, used the strap to apply extra pressure, but Starks refused to give up. He did not quit. He passed out. Excellent finish here. And in my opinion, this was definitely a match of the year contender. I felt like this was way above the level of a match you would see on Dynamite or Collision. Walter Cruz sent in $5. Wasn't the biggest fan of this show, apparently. He says, sorry, Aaron. I just feel like this pay-per-view was a glorified Dynamite or Collision, not a pay-per-view. TK really wanted me to cough up $50 for this shit. Felt deflated. Well, that's a strong statement. And build-up wise, you're right. But at least with this match and a few others, I think that they definitely went out there with something to prove that for the paying fans, they're still going to go out there and put on the best performances possible. I really did love the match. I think this was a match of the year contender, and Bryan's already had a few this year. We had Eddie Kingston and Shibata against the Blackpool Combat Club. This was another filler match. I mean, I would agree with Walter when it comes to this match. It was good, but another match that did not need to be on a pay-per-view. It was fine. It advanced the storyline. But again, they should have just done this match on Dynamite and set up Claudio versus Eddie Kingston one-on-one. I did like Eddie wearing a Claudio Sucks Eggs shirt, which was a tribute to Terry Funk. Terry Funk had the Dusty Sucks Eggs shirt back when they wrestled. What was it, like 1980, somewhere around that period? And the story in this match was that Claudio was trying to avoid getting in the ring and getting physical with Kingston. Eventually they did. They went at it. And it was a competitive match. Claudio, though, did score the pinfall victory. He beat Kingston with an uppercut. And I guess, you know, that'll set up the singles match. Pretty much what I was expecting from these guys. I figured Claudio would get the win, build up some heat to set up the singles match, which if they had done the singles match on this show, like I would have been all for it. But the tag match, you could have just done that on Dynamite. Give me a 3-hour pay-per-view. We had Kenny Omega versus Konosuke Takeshita, which was a singles match that has been building for several months. This was a match that I think was fitting to have on the pay-per-view. And this was a great match. Back and forth, competitive match with these guys. Some scary moments. I mean, they definitely held nothing back, and Omega was being nearly dropped on his head. I just worry that one day all it takes is just like a slight miscalculation and somebody's going to get badly hurt. But it hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood. You know, Omega being dropped with a backdrop driver suplex. And they fought on the outside of the ring. Omega did a moonsault off the barricade. Takeshita got the upper hand for a while. He gave Omega a brain buster on the floor. And Don Callis was interfering, laying out chairs on Omega. And Takeshita came over the top with a senton. It was brutal. This was a hard-hitting match. And Omega started to build up some momentum, did some dragon suplexes, poison Rana. Could not beat Takeshita, though. V-trigger, Takeshita kicked out of. And Takeshita avoided the one-winged angel. He tried to finish off Omega. He actually hit an avalanche blue thunder bomb and got the win. No, he did not. Even in AEW, blue thunder bomb does not end the match. Omega kicked out, and Takeshita was starting to get frustrated. So Don Callis attempted to murder Kenny Omega. He tried to stab Omega with the screwdriver. He missed, and the screwdriver was punctured into the ring. Pretty cool visual. I liked that. And this could have been the finish. Like, he missed. Omega hits the one-winged angel and picks up the win. But they kept going. And Takeshita tried to use the screwdriver, but the referee took it away. Takeshita managed to hit a knee strike to Omega. Omega kicked out. So Takeshita exposed his knee, hit another knee strike with the exposed knee, and got the 1-2-3 victory. I'm surprised. Omega lost again. He lost twice in a row. Lost it all in, lost again at the pay-per-view. I was not expecting this finish. Again, I would have been fine with the screwdriver not connecting and then Omega wins. But I guess they're going to keep the feud going, and they're trying to play up the idea that maybe Omega just doesn't have it anymore without Don Callis. Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat. Says maybe Kenny will put his career on the line at Wrestle Dream. You might be right on that. So we do have another AEW pay-per-view. They're increasing the schedule, which is gonna be a lot for people. Another $50 a year for a pay-per-view if you're somebody who's committed to buying the pay-per-views or it's your job. We got Wrestle Dream on October 1st in Seattle, which is a tribute to Antonio Inoki. Miguel said that he was at the show tonight and security asked him to turn his CM Punk shirt inside out and they were confiscating signs. Interesting. Felt like there was not a ton of support for CM Punk, but we'll get to that in just a few moments here. Like up until the Young Bucks came out there, I didn't hear any CM Punk chants on TV, and it felt like the fans were into the show. They weren't rebelling or trying to hijack the show. I wonder if Omega just wanted to lose here to show everybody, hey, even though I'm an EVP, I'm still a team player, and my job here is to put over other talent. Could be the case here, and that would also explain another finish on the show. We'll get to that here right now. Match was really good. Takeshita and Omega, great match. A little surprised with how it ended, but really good stuff. And I guess CM Punk chants were booed by the other half of the crowd as soon as they started. We had FTR and the Young Bucks against Bullet Club Gold. This was a really entertaining match. I think it was too long. And number two, I don't think it needed to be on this show just because it felt thrown together. Could have been a Dynamite match. You know, just, we got to have FTR and the Young Bucks team up. Well, that's a Dynamite storyline or a Collision storyline now that the Bucks are appearing on Collision. So basically, the Bucks were booed anytime they got in the ring. Although, while some fans were cheering CM Punk, others were booing out the CM Punk chants. And the Bucks did get a lot of cheers, and they were doing all their flashy moves. But it was just a long period where Bullet Club Gold, they were working over FTR, working over Hardwood, and then working over Cash Wheeler. By the way, Cash Wheeler referenced a sign in the crowd. He acknowledged it. There was a sign in the crowd that said, "Can't we all just get along?" And Wheeler was like, "I see you." So, you know, it's interesting. Bucks and FTR working together. And things broke down a couple of times. And during the match, FTR and the Bucks were working well together. They were helping each other out. Like for the Shatter Machine, Nick Jackson and Dax Harwood did the move. And then Matt Jackson and Harwood did the BTE trigger, stuff like that. And, you know, the Power and Glory spot with the superplex and the big splash, the Bucks participated in that. But despite them working well together as a team, they lost. Bullet Club Gold got the win. White hit the Blade Runner to Wheeler, and then Colton Gunn got the pin. This was another one I was not expecting. They are pushing Bullet Club Gold. I hate their music, though. Their music sounds like some generic track that they picked up online for free. Like they need a badass theme song if they're going to get this big push. quite frankly, I think Takeshita needs an actual theme song, like Don Callis coming out there with the sound. I don't know, just feels flat to me. I think he should have an actual entrance theme song. Match was very entertaining, but again, did not need to be on the pay-per-view. Building Nexus with a $2 super chat says Takeshita and Callis should join Bullet Club Gold. Well, maybe they will. Maybe there'll be some kind of merger at some point. Don Callis will expand the family. We had our main event of the evening, and I did not anticipate this being a pay-per-view main event a year ago. Orange Cassidy defending the international title against Jon Moxley in the main event of All Out 2023. Now, this was a great match, and I do think it was worthy of being on the pay-per-view. I don't think it was the best match of the night. I think that was the strap match, personally. And plus, by this point, they did blood, which had already been done. So you're overdoing the blood. It kind of loses its impact after a while. It's like, I already saw Danielson bleeding, Ricky Starks bleeding. Darby Allin was bleeding in his match, which was the second match of the main card. So by this point, it's like, I've already seen blood. You're kind of doing the same thing. But it was very competitive, I had a little bit of trouble suspending disbelief. It's like Moxley's trying to pick up Orange Cassidy, who's like, 125, 130 pounds, and he can't do it. And Orange Cassidy is outpowering Jon Moxley, giving him a back body drop. I'm sorry, but I don't buy it. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. But the idea that Orange Cassidy can take a beating and stay in the fight, that was well done. That was effective storytelling. The underdog, even though he's been a dominant champion, he's still the underdog against Jon Moxley, and he's a tough son of a bitch. He won't stay down. So that aspect of the storytelling I like. But Moxley's trying to do a move on the outside, like the outside was exposed. He exposed the concrete, and he's trying to do a move. And again, Orange Cassidy is able to outpower Jon Moxley and hit him with the beach break on the cement, which I just don't buy that. But yeah, very, very hard-hitting match here, violent match, as you would expect in a Jon Moxley match. And Moxley kept applying all these submissions. He kept transitioning, and Orange Cassidy got to the rope. He stayed in the fight, and Orange Cassidy busted out a spear. Moxley kicked out. Cassidy did his old kicks, the Orange Cassidy vintage kicks, and then he started turning up the intensity. Moxley fought back, though, hit a Death Rider. Cassidy kicked out, but Cassidy was pretty much spent at this point, and he flipped off Moxley in a last act of defiance, and then Moxley finished him off with another Death Rider. 1, 2, 3. Your new international champion, Jon Moxley. Big celebration with the Blackpool Combat Club. After the match was over, Cassidy got a standing ovation from the fans. They chanted, "Thank you, Orange," at him. And, it was a big moment for him. I actually don't think Moxley bled in this match. I think Moxley had Orange Cassidy's blood on him. Orange Cassidy was bleeding buckets all over the place. So it was a great match, great main event. And all in all, it was a really strong show, minus maybe 4 matches that were good, but did not need to be on this show. And you guys hear it every time, except for All In. These pay-per-views are too late and they're too long. either cut it down to 3 hours, or if you're insistent on doing a 4-hour show, start it earlier. Have the main card start at 7 and wrap it up by 11 p.m. Eastern. My opinion, that's what I would do. And I'm not sure I would do 2 pay-per-views week to week like this again. Because, I just felt after last week, after Payback, like I was feeling like I'm kind of done with wrestling now. And this was like at 9 o'clock Eastern. And then the show started picking up at that point. So I was getting into it. And I was really into Ricky Starks and Bryan Danielson. Like that was top tier match. Highly recommend it. Would I recommend the pay-per-view? Yeah, I still think it was a great pay-per-view. And I would probably go with a B+ for this. If they cut out 4 matches, if they cut it down to a 3-hour pay-per-view and you took out some of those less important matches, like this would be an A show. Like it would be a top level pay-per-view. But it was still really good. And the matches that I mentioned that were great, I mean, they're definitely worth your time to check out. So B+, really good show. And I do feel like I got my money's worth, even though the buildup for it was pretty lackluster. As I expected, they still delivered. Like, I can't remember AEW ever missing on a pay-per-view. And it would be tough to not deliver because the roster, extremely talented. You let them go out there and do their thing. They're going to deliver. Like it's pretty much impossible for AEW to have a bad pay-per-view. And the crowd was great, Chicago, and they didn't try to hijack the show or anything. They were into it, and especially for the Powerhouse Hobbs match with Miro. Like they made that a very memorable match. Like people will be talking about that match. I'll certainly remember that match a year from now, or even 5 years from now, with their chants and everything. It's something that people will remember. So hats off to the Chicago fans. And I do think AEW should probably run Chicago less often. That's another piece of advice. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you appreciate the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please give it a like on YouTube. Tell a friend. Spread the word. And remember, say yes to NoDQ.com. And I will see you all next time.